Well, hello and welcome to another installment of FIT Talks, the oral history program of the Fashion Institute of Technology, one of 64 campuses of the State University of New York. I'm James Ferguson, Special Collections Associate and Curator for the College Archives, and we're coming to you today from the FIT campus on West 27th Street and 7th Avenue in Manhattan. It is April 23rd, 2024, and the time is 2:10 p.m. Eastern Time. I have the honor and privilege to be joined today by Professor Karen Trivett, the head of my own Special Collections and College Archives department here at FIT Library. Professor Trivett, welcome to this program, which you know so well, and thank you for participating.
It is beyond my pleasure, and thank you for your time and for our wonderful videographer's time, Jen Brady.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Let's start. For context, would you please tell researchers a little about your childhood and your upbringing?
Mm-hmm. I grew up not amongst 8 million people. I grew up amongst about 40 people in a small village in eastern North Carolina, and was the middle of 3 girls, much to my father's delight. And I really had to use my imagination a lot. It was, like I said, rural, agricultural, sparsely populated, and it really taught me the value of imagination. And I think that's why even now I never really get bored. I had a recent conversation with someone about boredom, and I thought to myself, I really never get bored. And what a gift that is in bigger picture realm. But Institute, North Carolina was the town's name, or village's name, and it was named after the Lenore Collegiate Institute, and it was one of the first co-ed higher education institutions on this side of the Mississippi, and eventually was absorbed into what we know as Duke University. So it was grounded in the Methodist Church, as was I, and but so was higher ed. Higher ed, I think, has been part of the DNA for a very long time. And so all of that comes together to make me feel like I always wanted something a little different than what I grew up with. And in 1968, when I was 4 years old, my parents got the World Book Encyclopedia. And it was so aptly named for me because it brought to me a world I never knew existed. And one of the, or rather 3 of the volumes that were most used was A, P, and S, art, painting, sculpture. And almost every image that was really calling to me in those 3 volumes had a similar caption, and the caption of the picture said that the original work was held at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And I said, New York, I need to get there.
Nice. As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I thought about that question, having asked it of others in this program, and I just laughed out loud this morning because I thought, really and truly, I have to be honest, the first thing I wanted to do was be a waitress at Eason's Cafe wearing white go-go boots. That's what I wanted to be.
I have a history with white go-go boots as well.
I thought you'd appreciate that. But what really called to me was that somewhere else. And so when I thought about how could I incorporate being somewhere else, I thought what careers would take me there. So I thought about being a flight attendant. I thought about just the whole art world, because a lot of other captions were other institutions in other countries. So I thought, well, that could be a vehicle to get me somewhere else. But in second grade, I articulated it distinctly, and that was to Mrs. Hart's second grade class, seated alphabetically, trivet near the end. Everybody's standing up answering, what do they want to be when they grow up? Doctor, lawyer, teacher, nurse, you name it. And it comes to trivet, and trivet stands up. I just want to go to France. And Mrs. Hart, I think I failed the assignment. But anyway, so I had my mind set on what could get me to France specifically. And so, again, you swirl with possibilities of what could get you to a different place. And one of my earliest memories, March of 1966, is drawing. And the reason why I know I can pinpoint to that is I have a photograph with a border, and on the border is MAR.66. And those old snapshots used to give you that metadata on impact. And I am drawing. And so I knew art had to be part of my life. I knew a not better place, but bigger place needed to be part of my life. It took me a long time to figure out the real answer to that question, but I got there.
Nice. All right. You mentioned it briefly, but would you like to tell us anything more about your formal education and your informal education, for that matter?
Oh, my. Formal education, almost all public schools or universities. I say almost because the first 5 years of education in elementary school were in church-related schooling organizations, and then 6th grade was public school, and then it was public thereon, all through high school, and then undergrad, graduate school. Only now, as a PhD student, am I in a private university set in Central Europe. But I very much appreciate the public university, public education ethos. I feel like it's something that we shouldn't regard as a privilege, but a right. And I feel like all the spirit that takes away from public education, all the siphoning of resources, is just going to bite us eventually as a society. So I feel very privileged for having gone through public education. I studied at UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina Chapel Hill, for art history, and I made it into design history as much as I could. I had my first costume history class in 1990 with Professor Bobby Allen, and it really hit home. But informal education was also all about design. And I still have my first Vogues that I bought at age 15, 1978. Peggy Dillard is on the cover of August, and Jacqueline Bisset is on the cover of March. Just love those books. They will go with me, just like the encyclopedias, which are in my apartment. They will go with me everywhere. They are that meaningful. So sort of self-taught in terms of fashion, awareness. I won't say history so much, but just awareness. But that led to that course with Professor Allen, and wanting to know a little bit more about this industry and its past. So yeah, I took, and going back to the art realm, I took art lessons, studio lessons from a very young age through roughly age 26, 27, so about 20 plus years. And I'm interested maybe in getting back into that eventually.
All right. And what was your first job?
My first job in North Carolina agricultural area, you can't escape tobacco fields. So, the rite of passage for me, my sister, cousins, and neighbors was to work in the tobacco fields every summer. And my first job was, as was dictated by the farmer in question, Mr. George Creech. He said, all of our first summer employees drive the tractor that pulls the harvester, which is 2 stories tall and holds 9 adult human beings. And they left it to a 13-year-old that could barely reach the pedal to pull this apparatus through the fields and make turns. And that was my first job. And it bought some really cool school clothes. That was always the hook, is where can I get the money to get the school clothes?
Mm-hmm. What other kinds of jobs have you had between those tobacco fields and here?
Yes. Well, a lot of jobs, but I'll say an earlier career was in outside sales. And so much of that, and some retail, and that has served me so well. Talk about a boot camp training ground opportunity and how to relate to people. Mm-hmm. Because so much of what I've done at FIT has been relationship building and sustaining, otherwise developing. So, but sales also allowed me to use my art background, because I had to, as part of the job, design some logos. So, and literally using a window with sunshine coming through to cut and paste paper to create graphic images, mm-hmm. So that one could finesse them in a computer program and then deliver them for consideration. So that was great fun, actually. And it still thrills my mother in North Carolina to see one of my designs on television.
They're still there?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Heating and Cooling Company. I took half a circle and made it a snowflake and the other half a sun. And they wanted something literal. I mean, a colleague of mine had designed something very beautiful and abstract. And they were like, what? Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I'll take that literalness and put it to paper. So, but anyway, I very much enjoyed that. I did not enjoy sales to the effect that I didn't believe in what I was selling. And so I knew I wanted to harness those lessons and turn it into something I believed in, mm-hmm. selling.
Yeah. Which maybe leads us to, how did you decide on your career, or how did it decide on you?
It was definitely a conversation. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, the encyclopedia was a hint. The love of information, finding out more, and actually loving when I would hear a sibling or a parent ask a question, I wondered, well, would World Book answer that? And I'd go and seek out the answers to their questions and curiosities. So, when I was really conflicted with what to do with my life, I found this beautiful book by Lawrence G. Bolt, B-O-L-D-T. And cleverly, it's entitled How to Find the Work You Love. And it's a very thin, beautiful little book. But it asks the question, quoting Aristotle, in fact, or saying from a quote of Aristotle, where the needs of the world intersect with your talents is your calling. Paraphrased. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take that one step further and say, what kind of world do I want to be, active within? Mm-hmm. And art was the big label on top. So my talents were figuring out answers to questions, problem solving, mm-hmm. and I wanted to help be a problem solver in the art world. And I loved education, so that got tossed into the salad bowl. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, okay, when it came down to declaring the answer to this question, I was sitting on a sofa, June of '99, with my ex-husband, and we were just batting about, brainstorming. And I was able to articulate to him, and then later to my master's program advisor, I want to be in New York City, working in higher education, catering to art and design curricula, managing their special collections and college archives.
Wow. All right.
And my advisor laughed at me and said, good luck. Good luck with that. And it took 8 years, but, and other boot training opportunities or boot camp opportunities. And yeah, just, it was about getting ready for this place and this opportunity.
How did you come to work at FIT?
I was at the New York State Archives in Albany, New York, the state capital, and had been working for about 3 years with government records. Actually, I was training people to work with government records. I wasn't working with records directly. And I saw this job ad for a position in New York, not necessarily the FIT position, but it really churned something in me. And it was a desire to be here. I had articulated it years before, but I really wanted to act on it. Well, that particular opportunity did not work out. So I retreated and I thought, well, what can I do in Albany to exhaust what it has to offer? And so I started a PhD program in informatics at the University of Albany. I was in the middle of that when the FIT position was advertised, and I was a good semester in. I had GA positions and I was really entrenched, but at the same time realizing it wasn't a really good match for me. Informatics being the study of how people, information, and technology intersect. And this particular program was very heavily focused on the technology side of that three-legged stool, and that's not really where my heart and mind want to be. So I decided, okay, I'll throw my hat into the ring. And I got called in for an interview, and that went really well. And then by the time I got called back for a second interview, I decided to regroup again and say, okay, I've committed to this program. I need to stick with that. I pulled my application and did so very reluctantly, but I really felt like when you start, so I grew up in a very athletic family, and when you commit to something, you stick with it. Well, fast forward a couple of months, and the semester ends, the new semester has started, it's not a good fit, and I just know it. I wrote to the chair of the search committee here at FIT, Greta Ernest, now director of the library, and I said, how jealous of the incumbent should I be? Thinking someone had been appointed to the job or hired for the job. And she wrote back to say, we stopped the search. We couldn't find a good match. Does your question imply you are still interested?
Oh.
And I said, hell yeah. And so it just took off from there. They invited me to come back and interview a second time. Ended up being a full day. I interviewed second time here in the library with library faculty, did my presentation, interviewed with Vice President Regina Habusha, who was VP of Academic Affairs at the time, and then with Dr. Brown. And it was quite a day. But I felt like 5 miles high at the end of it. And I started here August 15th, 2008.
All right. What experiences stand out most for you during your tenure here at FIT?
Not getting lost on campus because the buildings are adjoined. And even on that day, with all of those interviews and presentations, I had to find my way on my own. And I was a bit intimidated. So fast forward a few years, in 2016, we finally raised the money to experience a full gut renovation of the unit. And we went from 3,500 square feet to 7,100 square feet. And everything, every nut, bolt, or dust of cement was changed. And it was like another master's degree of experience. I'd never gone through anything like that. I had heard, stories of renovations. Unfortunately, a lot of horror stories. And so my first order of business when I started here in '08 was to start investigating, because I was told this is on your horizon. Get ready for it. And so I went everywhere. I went to the Morgan, I went to the Whitney, I went to MoMA, Brooklyn Museum of Art. I went every place I could realize that had been through a renovation to this magnitude, and really got a great education through those visits. Both what to do, what not to do, how to recover from some of those what not to do's. And so it was either getting ready for the renovation or the renovation itself that stands out most.
Sure.
Because we were able to expand staff, we were able to expand programs. It's really the impetus for a lot of meaningful change that has happened since the end of the renovation of 2017.
Which person has had the most positive influence on your life, and what did they say or do to influence you?
I have to say my mother, because she's always encouraged me. She's never told me to hold back on an idea or a dream. In 1997, I was in New York on my honeymoon, and she and my dad were here with us for what was the first leg. We were off to Florence, Italy after New York. Still living in North Carolina at the time. We're on Fifth Avenue walking towards the Flatiron Building, and I'm saying to my husband, we can do this. We can live here. Look at all these people. Why can't we do this? And my mother said, you need to make up your mind. So I did.
Nice. Beyond people, what book or film or other work of art of any kind has influenced you the most?
Getting to Starry Night was a very big deal. Getting to one of those paintings with the caption of Museum of Modern Art was a very big deal. I know it might be not very popular for me to say this, but I have to say some films of Woody Allen were very influential. Manhattan, Annie Hall, they told me what was possible about living in New York. It being one of the characters. I mentioned the Bolt book earlier, but there's so many that have set up the rails to get me to this point. And even more recently, the people that I've met in Slovenia, where the PhD program is headquartered, have just lit a fire that at 60 you wouldn't think was perhaps possible. And it's just more and more deeply about archival science. So I don't see that going away anytime soon, in terms of day-to-day involvement. So those people, very influential. But my mother is also not just a smarty pants sometimes. She's also very she's heroic. And even though I can't be heroic in the same way she's been heroic, I've wanted to make an impression on something because she definitely has had that superpower.
Mm-hmm.
And I very much strive to be like that.
Nice. So what are your future plans or dreams?
Well, today being April 23rd, 2024, I am actually about to retire from FIT on May 30th. So a little over a month. It's been just such a glorious trip. I didn't mention this earlier, but in June of 2000, after that declaration to my very comically moved advisor, I set up 3 informational interviews in New York. And one was at Harry Abrams Publishers because of their art expertise. And then one was at FIT with Howard Dillon, who was the director at the time of the library.
Yeah.
And then one was with Janice Ekdahl, the chief librarian at the Museum of Modern Art. And I really was determined to get in those places. Now, Harry Abrams was the outlier, but I did get opportunities at Museum of Modern Art and at FIT to contribute just a little bit, and it's just been wonderful. And I hope, obviously, to finish the PhD.
Mm-hmm.
The dean and director of the program has asked me to start an English language master's program here in the States.
Oh.
So I've tried to work on that in the last few months to accumulate and assemble a faculty, which is pretty much done. And now it's all about students. We've got to get the students. But like I said earlier, the program for the PhD level has just been magical, and I'd love to have my colleagues from abroad infuse this program with that same magic. So I hope to stay busy with them.
Nice. Lovely. What would you most like for people to remember about you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind was that the statement, she wanted to keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's been one of the biggest joys of this work, has been no 2 days have been the same. No 2 lessons have been the same. The only thing that's been a consistent is that there's a problem to solve, a mystery to unravel, and something new to learn. And in special collections, we just have so much material, you cannot commit it all to memory.
Mm-hmm.
Even yesterday with a class, wanting to look at avant-garde couture, I saw specimens I had never seen before. And I know that'll happen up till the last day.
Mm-hmm.
I will see things I've never seen before. And that is a great full circle, because in North Carolina, even before World Book Encyclopedia, I knew there was something more to learn. And that's been a real guidepost.
That's great. Finally, what question didn't I ask you that you wish I had?
How strong an SPF am I really going to need on May 31st? Just kidding.
These and other pressing questions.
Other pressing questions.
Yep. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you for your participation. I think Special Collections has just been made more special because of your involvement. I mean that sincerely. You've been just a magician when it's come to answering certain questions, again, unraveling mysteries. I think about the athletic department and all the work you uncovered, all the information you uncovered about what is really an unsung part of the campus, really. Its operation is this athletic department. But you took on that assignment and really fleshed it out, and now it's in the archives forever to be discovered again and again. And I guess I just want to say thank you to everyone. I had to think about what I would say if this question were posed. And I just want to say that it's not just the campus of FIT, the institution of FIT, but it's the people here that have given me more than a livelihood, but a life. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Been a pleasure.
Nice.